right, hello, boys and girls, and ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Aquarium Live. I am Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach. And we invite you, or first of all, thank you for inviting us into your homes so that we can bring the aquarium and this presentation to you. But if you would like to join us by including comments or questions, we invite you to participate by texting if you're watching live at 562-286-1838, and we welcome your questions and comments. Now, parents or children, make sure that you check with your parents or the adults with you to make sure that it is okay, as text messaging rates may apply. Also, if you're watching this at a later time, you can email us your questions at live@lbaop.org. So you have two different ways that you can interact with this program today. So what we are going to focus on today is how fish use their colors to camouflage. And to help us learn a little bit more about this, I have asked my friend Captain Joe to help us out. So let's see if we can find Captain Joe here at the aquarium. Let's see where he is. Hi, Captain Joe. Hi, are you swimming? What are you doing, Captain Joe?
Why, hello there, boys and girls. It's Captain Joe here, and yes, as a matter of fact, I am swimming underneath water right now inside the tropical galley. I've finally mastered my technique of underwater breathing, just like my idol, the harbor seal.
Yeah, are you sure? How are you talking underwater?
It doesn't matter. Anyways, let's just go ahead and observe some fish.
Oh, hi, Captain Joe.
Hey. How strange. She must be able to hold her breath underneath water as well. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, Captain Joe, I don't think you're swimming.
All right, you caught me. But someday I will be able to hold my breath underwater like my idol, the harbor seal. Anyways, we are here in the tropical gallery, and I do have to tell you, boys and girls, we have a lot of very, very colorful fish here today.
That's great. Well, can you tell us how they use their colors?
Well, that is a very good question again, and we might as well do what we always do. Let's investigate.
All right, well, as Captain Joe goes off to investigate, we'll do some of our own investigating here in our studio. Now, we have up here, my friend Alicia's pulled up a picture of one of the coolest looking animals we have at the aquarium. Look at this. This animal right here is a moray eel. Maybe you've seen these before, you've heard of them. How would you describe what a moray eel looks like? Well, just looking at his face, he's got kind of a funny looking face. He almost looks like he's got a sort of grumpy smile. And then his eye is way up here. But I could be confused if I was looking at this, because I would think, well, wait a minute, is this an eye? Because it's kind of round and it looks like an eye. That's a little confusing. Or maybe these little things here are the eyes. Well, that might be a little confusing. Do you know what this might be? Do you know what this might be? If you know, feel free to text in at 562-286-1838 and let us know. Get your parents' permission first and let us know what you think this big black thing might be, if it's not the eye. Because here's the eye, here's the mouth. But while we're waiting for responses to come in, let's talk about the shape of this animal. He's long and skinny, and it's helping him in his habitat where he lives. Look at this habitat. Do you notice those rocks? He's kind of in an opening in the rocks where he might be able to sneak in with his long, skinny shape. Now, go ahead and put your hands together and think about how an eel would move. How do you think an eel moves with his long, skinny shape? Yeah, kind of that back and forth and slithering around like this. That long, skinny body allows him to sneak into those openings and cracks and crevices in the rocks. And Sebastian said, ooh, could it be a fin? That's a really good question because we know that eels are fish and fish have fins, right? Well, this one is a trickster because this one does not have fins on the side like other fish have. So this one is really confusing, isn't it? This creature is strange. Oh, somebody said, is it an eye? Maybe it's another eye. Well, this creature is still confusing us because this is not an eye. His eye is actually right up here in the front. He's got that little round eye. So he's got two eyes, one on each side of his head, way up at the front of his head. Now, why do you think his eyes are way far forward on his body? Well, think about it. If he's taking his long, skinny body and hiding back into a cave, he can hide all of his body, and all he has to do is keep his two little eyes out so he can see where his prey might be or where there might be predators that he can hide back from so no one else can see him. And it's hard for other creatures to get into the space where he is because of his long, skinny body. So let's see if there are any other guesses. What might this be? What is something an eel would need underwater besides being able to see, besides fins? Ooh, Anton said nostrils? Could it be what he's using to breathe and to smell? Well, that's an interesting thing because eels, they do have something that helps them to smell right up here, and they're called nares. But we use our nose for smelling, but we also use it for breathing. Well, eels don't use these for breathing. What do eels have to help them breathe? And Anton, you were kind of close to it. Let's see if we've got someone else. Someone else mentioned, Sebastian said it's a spot that looks like an eye, but this is actually not a spot. And it's kind of like the nostrils because these are where the gills are. So the gills are hidden underneath that little opening there. That is what allows the eel to breathe. Isn't that interesting? So this fish is very good at confusing possible would-be predators like us. Hopefully you weren't planning on eating the eel. But he confused us with this because we thought maybe that's his eye. It looks a lot like an eye. Or maybe it's a fin. But we didn't realize that's what he's using to breathe. And again, his little spots up here that help him to smell, he doesn't breathe with. He just uses those for smelling. In fact, sometimes when you see a picture of an eel, you'll see them opening and closing their mouths. And that's actually helping them to get more of the sense of smell, too, of what's going on around them and helping them to breathe and get the water into their gills as well. So interesting looking animal, isn't it? But it's got this funny color. And what's strange is that they have a sort of slimy layer over their body, and it makes them appear this kind of greenish color. So they have kind of almost like a blue and yellow combination, making them appear this green color. So let's look at a habitat here at the aquarium. This is our blue cavern habitat, and you'll notice rocky spaces, just like where we said eels like to hide out. And notice some of that yellow color. That's kind of a similar color to what an eel has on its body. So this would be a great place for an eel to hang out and to kind of stay away from would-be predators. And then, of course, can't miss pointing out this guy. He's our giant sea bass. But anyhow, as we've been exploring and learning about the eel, I believe Joe was looking for some more animals in another gallery. So as he's looking, we're going to go ahead and play a game. Do you guys want to play a game? All right. Since we're talking about camouflage, that'll be your clue to what type of animal might be behind these bubbles. And behind me, I'm blocking it right now. But when I move out of the way, let's see what you can tell from these bubbles. And if you think you know what the answer is, go ahead and text in, if you have permission, to 562-286-1838. What type of animal is behind this screen of bubbles? What do you think it is? And as you're wondering and as you're typing in, I have another question that came in. They said, do eels migrate? Oh, that's a really good question. And I have never heard anyone talk about the answer to that question. my guess is, I haven't heard of them migrating. I think they like to hang out in their own special little areas, especially when they find them a good crack or crevice in the rocks. But if I learn any differently, I will be sure to tell you. But I don't know of eels migrating. But again, if I find out during the course of this program that they do migrate, I will get back on the camera and let you know. But thank you for that question. Okay, so have you figured out what type of animal is behind these bubbles? I will give you one more hint. It's not actually a fish. We've been talking about fish. This one is not. All right. Ooh, so we have some guesses of possibly a seahorse, possibly an octopus. Were there other guesses that came in? An eel or a crab? Oh, there are lots of guesses for octopus, I'm hearing. So let's go ahead and reveal and see which type of these animals it might be. Ah, well, can you even see it? It's camouflaging so well, maybe it's hard to tell. What do you think? Is it an eel? Is it a seahorse? Or is it an octopus? It is an octopus. So if you guessed octopus, you are correct. And this right here is what a lot of times people think of as being the head of the octopus. But his head is right here because you know what that is? You know what those spaces are? Those are their eyes. So just like your eyes are on your head, the eyes of the octopus is on its head. And right between its eyes, he's got his very smart brain. He's a very smart animal. But then this thing, this is a little bit different than you and I. This is his visceral mass, basically his big sack of guts. So he hangs his stomach and all his insides kind of behind him. And then he's got all of his arms with suction cups on them, all out in front of him. And how many arms does an octopus have? Go ahead, show me how many fingers. 8. They have 8 arms. Octopus have 8 arms. And so you can't see all of them, but you can try to see some of them. Do you see those little suction cups right there on the ends? So that's the coolest thing about octopus arms is they've got these suction cups that are great for sticking and helping them catch their prey. Also, it helps them taste their prey too. Did you know that? Kind of cool. All right, so we've got some more arms you can see back there, but this is a great camouflaging animal. It's not a fish because fish are birds. Fish are animals with bones. They have bones inside their bodies, and that's something that makes the octopus very different because he's what we call an invertebrate, an animal that doesn't have any bones whatsoever in its body. So he's very flexible and very squishy. So anyhow, good job if you guessed octopus because that is one of our camouflaging creatures, our invertebrate. Notice how well he matches the background around him. And he actually can use visual cues to let him know how to change his color. So he's a type of animal that can change. He has these little things inside his skin that can expand and get really big to be a certain color, or he can shrink them down so that you don't see that color. But he's got different colors that he can appear to be at different times, however he wants to look. Wouldn't that be fun if we could do that? Well, we can't. But an octopus is a very cool camouflaging animal. So now let's go back to Joe and see if he's found anything. So let's go back. Oh, I'm going to stay off the screen and see if we can pull Joe up. Oh, there he is.
Hey, boys and girls. I'm here at the Tropical Gallery observing, hiding out using camouflage. What I've found out is that these animals have many different colors and they use them for many different reasons. So, let's go observe and find out more.
All right, so as he's going to observe and find out more, I wanted to ask if you noticed that fish that he was hiding behind, because that is a fish that does live in the tropical coral reefs, and it has some really cool markings on it. So my friend Alicia brought up a picture of that same fish. It's called a copper-banded butterfly fish. Now, what kinds of things do you notice about this fish that are different from the eel that we were looking at? Now, we're talking about camouflage, and keeping in mind that while the octopus might change his colors instantaneously, a fish like this doesn't necessarily change his colors on the spot. Now, they can kind of tone them down so that they're not as bright, or they can kind of turn the brightness up like the screen settings on your TV or your monitor. But this coloring that he has helps him camouflage in different ways because they have different habitats. And sometimes the coloring on a fish might not even be for camouflage, it might be for a warning. But let's look at the markings on this fish because it has some really cool markings. What do you notice? Again, you can text us at 562-286-1838 if you want to share some observations that you can make about this fish. Now, as we're waiting for some of those messages to come in, I also want to point out that he's got this really long, skinny mouth. And he can use that mouth because he lives in a coral reef habitat. And coral reefs can have these really small spaces, kind of like the small spaces the eel would fit in. It has these small spaces in between the corals where there might be food hiding that these fish or butterfly fish might want to eat. So then they swim on up to it and they can poke their heads into those small spaces and get tiny little animals that might be living in between the corals or tiny little algae that's growing in those spaces. So having a long skinny mouth is really helpful in the coral reef. Also, if we were to look at that fish swimming right at us, and you might even notice on some of these fish, they have a different sort of body shape. Instead of being long and skinny, that also helps them to hide in small spaces. They have kind of a tall and skinny body. So they're very, very skinny if they start swimming right at you. But if they were to swim to the side, they would look much larger. So we were looking at the side view of that butterfly fish. But if he was to swim right at us, he would be really, really skinny. So that compressed shape helps him to blend in with his coral reef environment. Now, do you notice all the colors in here? Look at how brightly colored these animals are and also how brightly colored the corals are in the coral reef. So having those bright colors can also help them camouflage. So obviously you wouldn't want to be bright and colorful in a very dark and dull area, but you could, unless you're using it for warning. But if you're in a bright, colorful area, then you might stand out more if you're really, really dark. Okay, so we have a comment that says the fish has a black hole like the eel. That is an excellent observation. Do you see something that looks like it's also a black hole on here? Is it? Yeah. Oh, that's right here. Except look at the location. Is there anything else this reminds you of? Remember how it confused us before and we thought it must be another set of eyes. Is that the eye? What do you think? Does that look like the eye of the fish? Or does the fish have an eye somewhere else? So there's the eye of our fish. But do you notice something sneaky that that fish is doing? He is trying to hide his eye. What is he using to hide his eye with? Okay, Langston said the fish has pretty colors, and I agree. It's very bright and colorful. It's not like the same one solid color that the eel had. It has, what colors do you see? It has yellow and white and black. Black, white, and yellow are very common colors in butterfly fish. And someone said it looks like a bee with stripes. That's a good description because it does have stripes just like bees do, yellow and black and white. So that's a pretty good description, I'd say, of our little fish here. But this is really funny. It's still got that little black spot, and it's so confusing to us because if I was to look at this fish and I was a hungry predator, I might get confused, and then I might think, oh, that right there is the eye of the fish, so I'm going to chase it. Well, if something is chasing you and you're trying to get away from it, you usually run forward. If you get scared, you don't usually back up like this, but that's kind of like fish. Fish don't usually swim backwards. They swim forward. And so if another animal sees this and they think that that is the eye, they might think that this right here is the head of the fish and he's swimming that direction. But it's not. So because it is a false eye, a spot, I should say, it looks like a spot that looks like an eye, we call it a false eye spot. And that is one thing that a lot of fish will use to confuse would-be predators. So something that's interested in eating it, they might have a special spot on their body that makes that predator think that it's their eye. And it might confuse that predator, so it starts to chase them this direction when the fish is really going that way, or vice versa. But I love how it's also camouflaging its eye right in that stripe. Isn't that interesting? That stripe goes right through that eye coloring. So interesting coloration on this fish. But let's go see if Joe has caught up with anyone else.
Hey boys and girls, I'm here with our seahorses and I found my friend Jen. She's an aquarist here at the aquarium. Jen, what are some of the things you do here at the aquarium?
I do a lot of things to take care of the animals here, including feeding and a lot of cleaning.
Very nice, very nice. Now, we're here with the seahorses, and we do know that they have very long faces and very curly tails, but we're learning about colors today. Can you tell us a little bit how they use color in their environment?
Absolutely. Seahorses use color to camouflage or to hide within their environment, and because they're so well hidden, they can sneak up on their prey.
Ooh, I like that. Now, sneaking sounds very cool. Are there any other animals in the aquarium that sneak up on their prey?
Absolutely. We have a lot. They are very hard to find, so really need to use your eyes. I suggest you go ahead and head down to Blue Cavern and look at our giant sea bass.
Giant sea bass. I think that's something we definitely need to investigate.
Yeah, the giant sea bass are pretty cool animals. And while he's heading down to see the giant sea bass, let's take a closer look at the seahorses right by where Jen and Captain Joe were. Look at them. Do you notice how they're kind of camouflaging with their habitat around them too? And look at their cousin, the sea dragon. Look at how different it looks. Do you notice some of that wavy stuff behind them? That looks like the holdfast of some kelp. In fact, it almost looks like kelp coming off of those sea dragons and seaweed all over their body. Now watch how these animals will eat their prey. These little sea dragons, they have little teeny tiny mouths, and they use them for capturing little teeny tiny mysid shrimp that we've put in the water for them. So you can see these little tiny baby seahorses. Aren't they so cute? They're eating little tiny baby shrimp. And look at how tiny they are. So they're little hunters even when they're little babies. And having that long tail helps them to hold on so that they're not just being thrown all over the ocean with the ocean waves. And it also allows them that dark color to camouflage and kind of blend into some of the darker areas until they get a little bit bigger. So Anton also said, why is the tail clear on the butterfly fish? Oh, Anton, that's a good observation. So I don't know if we can bring up that picture of our butterfly fish again. Look at how it has that clear tail. Well, also being see-through and kind of clear like that is something that can help a fish protect itself as well. Because if you are seeing right through something, you might not notice it's there. What if this fish was somewhere and only his little tail was sticking out? Well, if it was a bright color, you might see that tail and someone might be like, oh, there must be a fish on the other side of it. But when it's kind of clear like that and it's blending in, it's harder to see it. But it's kind of neat for us to watch it when we know it's there, looking at those little rays that come out, I should do it this way, of the fish's tail. Also, did you see the fins right here? You might not have seen them, but they are there. So the eel doesn't have those side fins, right? But this one does, but they're very clear. So why exactly this particular fish has clear fins, I don't know. But it is something that's true of the copper-banded butterfly fish. They have these very clear fins, and it might help them not only to swim, it gives them all that they need for regular fin swimming, but it allows them to maybe not be seen a little bit more. Let's go ahead and see if we can get a hold of Joe, if he's made his way down into Blue Cavern yet. Let's see. Oh, good job, Joe. Looks like you found it. So you found the giant sea bass, but actually, Joe, where'd you go? Hello? Looks like you found the giant sea bass behind you.
In this pretend seaweed or kelp to blend in with our kelp habitat.
Well, you found the giant sea bass.
I sure did. Let's go ahead and take a closer look.
Well,
Now, boys and girls, here is one of our giant sea bass. Sometimes in the ocean, instead of blending into a rock, an animal will try to blend into the shadows or into the water itself. Now, the dark mottled color of the giant sea bass allows it to lurk in the dark parts of the kelp forest. only to lunge forward when a small prey fish comes near and sucks it right into its mouth. The camouflage, paired with its careful, slow swimming, make the giant sea bass almost ninja-like in its stealth, even though it can eventually grow to weigh over 600 pounds. Now, boys and girls, these are just some examples of how these animals use color in their environment. I'm going to send it back to you in the studio, and you're going to learn a little bit more about animals and how they use their color in the wild.
Well, Joe, I saw a lot of polka dots. But what about animals with stripes?
I'm pretty sure I saw a striped animal in the tropical Pacific Gallery. How about you meet me there?
All right, we'll meet them there. All right, so did you notice all the spots and all the markings on those fish? Even the big fish, they had big blotches. And I think that kind of was helping them camouflage too. Did you notice how dark that habitat was? And having those darker colors were helping those fish to camouflage. So polka dot markings, and we saw the polka dot little spot, the false eye spot is what we call that on a fish that might make a predator think that that's the eye when it's really not. Those are different markings to help them, in a way, camouflage and confuse predators, because that's really the reason why an animal would want to camouflage. So they want to make sure they're staying safe so things that they don't want to be seen by don't see them. But they might also use it to help them get their prey. Just like we were watching that seahorse eat its prey very, very quickly. Sometimes animals will hide out and wait for their prey to come by, the food that they want to eat, and then they'll quickly jump out and grab it. And so their coloration can help them to do that. So different ways that their markings can help them survive. And those are things we call adaptations, things that help them survive. Oh, look at the eel, he came out. That's great timing. So our eel, do you see his gill little hole? His gill opening right there? Look at that long, skinny tail he has. Oh, he's coming back. We can see him again. Yay. All right. He's moving me right off the screen here. But let me also answer another question from Charlotte. She says, do octopus have a nose? Ooh, that's a good question. They actually don't have a nose. They also have to breathe. So what do you think they use to breathe? Just like fish, they have gills. They have gills underneath their bodies. But yeah, they don't actually have a nose. But really good question. How big does a giant sea bass get? So as Joe was mentioning earlier, they can get up to 600 pounds. And they can get pretty big. The ones in our exhibit, I know it's kind of hard to see them in comparison with the screen behind me, but well, I don't know, they're about like this big, I would guess. When I see them swim by, they're huge. They're really big. Their name, giant sea bass, I think is a pretty good name for them. Okay, yeah, about 600 pounds is what we had mentioned before. Let's see, we are running out of time, so we better, let's check in with Joe real quick, see if we can pull him up.
Hey boys and girls, so these are the animals with black and white stripes I was talking about. These are our banded sea kraits. We have one right there, and they are very venomous animals, and they use their coloration to give a warning off to other animals. They basically say, look out, I'm quite dangerous. They're very, very cool.
All right, so that was very cool, Joe. And I think we'll get back to you maybe, or we might have to say bye now, to talk about some other warning coloration in other animals. So he was talking about the sea kraits, but then this is another animal that uses its color more for warning. And you probably know what this animal is. It is a clownfish or an anemone fish. And you see he's got that bright orange color. He's got the white stripes on his body with the black sort of outline around those stripes. So it's very clear when you see this fish, it stands out. When you walk by this exhibit, you usually don't have to look very hard to find a clownfish because their colors are so bright and colorful. And it is a way of letting other fish know, you know what, you might want to stay away from me because I've got a really good protective home. So the clownfish itself isn't going to pose any threat, but where it lives can definitely be dangerous to other animals because they live in sea anemones. So sea anemones, we can probably show you a picture of a sea anemone. It's basically, or we might not be able to, it's this animal that lives like this with these tentacles sticking up like this. And the fish, the clownfish, can live in the tentacles and be nice and safe because of a layer that he has around his body that kind of matches the same chemical sort of scent of the stinging cells of the sea anemone. But if the clownfish is trying to run away from another animal, if that other animal chases him into the sea anemone will sting it and grab it and eat it for lunch or breakfast or dinner. So that warning coloration might be a way of the clownfish saying, like, don't mess with me. Okay, so keep your distance. And it's a way of keeping him safe. But boys and girls and adults or whoever else is watching, thank you for joining us for Aquarium Live today. I hope you've learned that even fish can use camouflage. And it's not necessarily that they're changing to match their environment like we oftentimes think about other animals like an octopus doing. They're not always changing their colors instantaneously, but it might just be their natural coloring that allows them to either be giving bright warning signs or to help them blend into their habitat. And maybe you remember that fish that we saw at the very beginning, or that Joe is hiding behind, we talked about. Do you remember what habitat that fish was in, that butterfly fish, when we looked at it? Think about everything we talked about. Did it live in a kelp forest? Did it live in a sandy bottom, or did it live in the coral reef? Do you remember? It lived in the coral reef. Fins and all of those things. So great markings on fish, helping them to survive in their habitat. Well, thanks again for joining us. And again, if you had any other questions and you wanted to interact with us at a later time, you can email us at live@lbaop.org, and we will be happy to answer your questions. But I hope that sometime you'll be able to join us here at the Aquarium of the Pacific when we're open. And in the meantime, feel free to check out our website and look for our exhibits on the webcams and other resources available to you while you're at home. So thanks for joining us, and have a great day, everyone. Bye.